is Piero. I'm actually writing a book right now, and I took a small pause. And I wanted to talk to you about a little story that happened to me when I was young. You know, recently there was this Gillette advertising that showed men as wimps and behaving completely, as usually, completely silly, especially in terms of children. Anyway, I was thinking about how violence happened, or at least how I was confronted with violence when I was a child. And children likes to play rough, like to fight each other, and humans are not made to do a lot of harm to others unless you use tools like knives and so on. But children, when they play rough and tumble and even fight, it's not so bad. So actually, that's how boys create hierarchies, and that's how boys manage conflicts, is physically fighting. And it's okay. It's okay to encourage them, but it's okay to teach to them when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. So it's okay. As long as they don't harm each other, no problem. There's no need to stop necessarily what they're doing. You need to explain to them, of course, afterwards what happened. Here's a story. When I was a kid, I was probably 11 or 12. I was in the school bus, and we were obviously going home in the evening. And I used to be on the front of the bus with some friends playing cards and so on. And my sister, younger sister, she was probably at the time 5 or 6, early days at school. She was on the back, middle of the bus, and on the back of the bus was a boy, probably maybe my age, slightly younger. I can remember he was physically smaller than me, maybe 1 year younger, and he was always creating fuss. He was from it was one of those countries with ruled by cultures that are peaceful, and so he was from the Middle East. And his name was Fadi. I remember that. Probably Lebanon, maybe, but certainly not Lebanese Christian for sure. They don't behave like that. This guy was at some point started to mess with my sister. I don't know what he was doing. I can't remember. A long time ago. That's 40 years ago. And he started to mess with her. And at some point, my sister starts to cry and ask for help. And okay, that's why. While the bus is driving, I woke up. I go there and say, what's happening? And he says, well, and the guy must have said something to me. I don't remember what. That's a long time ago. Anyway, what I remember is I gave him a knock with my right arm, and he was knocked down. And of course, that's it. He stopped. He, of course, complained to the bus driver, which, of course, said, hey, everyone quiet, everyone sit down. So, of course, we sat down. When I arrived at home, that was a week where my parents were actually away on business trip, and there was my grandfather. And my grandfather was waiting for me. So as my sister and I came down from the bus, the driver said to my try to explain to my grandfather that I had fought with someone, and that was bad. And my grandfather, okay, kind of said, don't worry, I'm gonna manage that. So the bus drove away. And my grandfather told me what happened. And I said, well, there was a guy who was upsetting my little sister. So I beat him. And my grandfather said, good. And let's go home, have a meal or something. Violence is often solution to problems. My personal philosophy is that you should not initiate violence. You should not be the one that starts the violence. Many other people start violence on us. The government with taxes. People who invade our countries. People who are acting violently against us. In which case, violence is often the only mean to resist to that. Now, we are in a feminized world, and I wrote a book about that, which is called Woman on the Verge of Economical Collapse. You should read it. It's a really great book. And I explain why we have feminized our world. And in one of the consequences is that feminized world wants conflict to be managed without physical violence. Hey, but women are extremely violent. They use words. They use systemic violence. They're not the only ones to use systemic violence, but we are in a world that is extremely violent, and then at the same time, we are preventing men to use violence to protect themselves. Hey, I'm not saying that all men are doing that properly. A lot of men are stupid and are using violence in a stupid way. But a lot doesn't mean all, and certainly not the majority. In fact, most men learn to behave properly in society, and it was better before when we had morals. before all of these collapsed, well, men knew how to use violence, and they knew how to use violence appropriately. And so, a few years back, for example, 40 years later, I have 4 kids. My oldest son, at the time he was probably 8, and there was a guy in the school messing with everyone, and at some point he messed with my son. So this guy was again probably another Norwegian or Swedish guy in our schools in Europe. You know how these guys create all the problems. Anyways, so this guy was messing with him, and my son was upset because a few times he said, "Well, this guy during the the break sessions he messed with me and so on." Okay, and say, "Well, see, I'm not the kind of father who tells children what to do. I'm trying to make them think by themselves, and therefore have their own thoughts and their own solutions to problems." And I say, "Well, what do you think?" And I say, "Well, what would you like to do?" And I say, "I would like this to stop." I say, "Well, that's not your choice. If he messes with you, what are you going to do?" And I say, "Well, maybe I should defend myself." So, yeah, maybe. But here's an advice, because if you accept my advice, first you tell him that you don't want to fight, you don't want to have problems, you don't want to mess with him at all. He's not your friend, he's not your, you're not in the same even classroom. So if he messes with you, you should tell him, "Look, here's a warning. I don't want to interact with you. I don't want to mess with you. I don't want to have problems. So leave me alone." Now, if this fails, and it may fail, well, then if he insults you, or maybe you want to talk to the teachers and so on. But if that fails, or if it becomes physical, if he hits you, you must hit back. And you must hit back as hard as you can, as strong as you can. The rationale is not about the fun of fighting. I mean, you have wrestling for that, you have sports for that. The rationale is that a predator will try to predate on the weakest or the least risky victim. If you fight back, suddenly you become risky, because fights can always go wrong, and this guy can lose. He was bigger than my son. He was older. And even if you lose, when you fight, protecting yourself against the predator will from now on know that you are fighting, and he will probably move to harassing someone who's not fighting or is weaker. So you always win when you fight back. And also you teach a lesson to others that other potential predators should think twice before attacking you. So there's always a good rationale to use violence to defend yourself. Now, these are children, so we don't want to teach them ultra violence. But my kids go to Kung Fu at the time, and now they do Jiu-Jitsu. So all of them, or even the small ones. And so they are starting to learn as they grow physically, as they grow in muscle mass and potential. They know how to learn, how to defend themselves. And being in Switzerland, we have access to guns, and they will teach, and I will teach them to use these responsibly and within the laws and all that. So you have to learn to defend yourself. And these lessons are so important, because no one will look up to wimps. No one will look up to weak people. People look up to strong inside their minds, strong physically. And both women and men, we look up to people who are strong, who have values, and who know how to behave according to the human anthropology. And human anthropology is not to be weak. If you're weak, you will be gone. So that was a little story. I'm going back to writing my next book. So take care and prepare yourself. Ciao.